Hi, I'm Kraig Klaus, and this is S48HO Homeowner.
So today we are here, we've heard a lot of people talking, and we are here to burst the bubble conversation. And today we're here, we've got a special guest, Kraig Klaus. Hey Kraig, how you doing?
Incredibly great, Scott. How are you?
Excellent. So Kraig is our listing specialist at the Klaus team, and you know more about the homes in East Mesa than anybody on the planet, I'd guess.
With the exception of Kenny, maybe. But between the two of us, I would say we're pretty close. Yeah, we've been doing this for a while in this area.
I'd say the East Valley, yes.
Yeah. So how long have you been in the East Valley market?
I've been licensed in realtor since May of 2003 and in this market the entire time.
And we brought Kraig in today because Kraig is one of the agents on our team that really has his ear to what the market is saying. You've got a real clear understanding of it. You've got some incredible allies out there with some data providers, and you're looking at it daily and knowing what it says. And I know a lot of times that you'll go to talk with sellers, talk with buyers, and they're bringing up often the same conversation, which is, are we in another bubble?
When's the bubble going to burst? Yeah, and I think the one thing that I learned is that, we in 2005, we were just go, go, go when the market took off and, not really researching and understanding how it happened. And, when this started and with COVID and everything, it's one thing that I wanted to really learn this time is what's causing this, what's going to change and all of that so that, we were prepared and could be ahead of it.
Yeah, I think not only have we gotten the question so many times, as Scott mentioned, but turns out it's one of the number one Google searches for real estate is this a bubble? Are we in another bubble? And it makes sense. I mean, history a lot of times repeats itself, and it wasn't 10, 12 years ago now that we were in kind of a mortgage crisis and a real estate crisis. The housing market is still hot, but leading economists say, a crash is not imminent. And I think really when you look at the causes of the last housing bubble, that's where we want to kind of compare and contrast so that you guys really get clarity on why we feel this, and most leading economists that are in this space throughout the country do. A couple of the key factors back then is we had very low down payments, and there's a big contrast to that, in today's market. Flexible mortgage rates, so we saw a lot of those adjustable rates. We had oversupply. We had more, homes than we really had buyers, and lending guidelines were a lot looser then. And I think one of the reasons that we see 2021 so different is the combination of low inventory and high buyer demand means the risk of overbuilding is minimal. Just to give you a quick example, existing homes for sale in 2021, as of April, we were at 1.16 million. That same time frame in July of 2007 was 4 million properties. So significant difference in, we're really just not comparing apples and apples to two markets. They're very, very different in so many ways.
Yeah, and to take that locally, too, in the same kind of thing, what we're seeing here is, as of about noon today, we had about 6,700 homes on the market in the entire valley. And in April, that was about 4,700, but a balanced market, so just but not in favor of buyer or seller, is going to be somewhere between the 12 to 15,000 range. To give you an example, 2007, we were above 50,000 listings. So a little different, and locally, again, being down that low, it's a lack of supply, not a increase in demand.
Yeah, and let's go back to the causes, because we jumped over the idea, the low down payments and the flexible mortgage rates. Let's talk about why that caused such an issue, because it's going to contrast a lot with now. With the low down payments, the big issue there was just not having any skin in the game. Kenny, you've talked about, one of the contrasts that we have with today's market and last market is now as we see prices going up, we see rents climbing higher than that. 15 years ago, we saw prices going up, but rents were going down. And you talked about, when people were trying to make their mortgage payment but could rent cheaper across the street,
Well, it made it, if you look back when we were doing all of our short sale workshops and all that back in, 08, 9, 10, that was a big part of it is, we are one of about a dozen anti-deficiency states. And so people could literally, if they ended up foreclosing on their property, it's the only thing the bank could take back was the property. But they'd look at, the house they're in paying, say, $2,500 a month, and the same house across the street would be $1,200 a month rent. And so there was a lot of business decisions made. Now, if a house is $2,500 a month payment, rent is right there or more, quite honestly. We've seen such a significant rental increase. And keep in mind, people still need a roof over their head. Whether they own or rent, they still need a place to go. So there's no real incentive or motivation to, get out of a mortgage unless you just can't do it. And we will see that. But keep in mind, in 2007, 45% of first-time home buyers financed 100% of their home. So if you remember hearing those terms, stated income loans, they were very predatory loans. I think there's been even a couple movies on it out there. We are not seeing that. Now, don't get me wrong. America's quick to forget. And sometimes we get ourselves right back in trouble. But currently, the lending guidelines, the appraisal process is completely different than it was back then.
We've got more skin in the game. That's a big piece of it is that, if you're putting zero down, you're not sticking around when you had to save up and you remembered saving up that 3.5% or 5% or 10% or 20%. It becomes much more difficult to default.
There's no cushion for a market shift. If you pay for it here with zero down, the market shifts, you have nothing to fall back on. And I think, the lending guidelines, just as an example, there was a little over $300 billion more loans done in 2006 for people with FICO scores under 620 than there was in 2020. So the guidelines have gotten tougher. In 2006, 89% of the mortgages had done a cash out refi. In 2020, it's 38%. So people learned a little bit. We're not, didn't use their house as an ATM as much, and that's a big part of it.
Well, and they're not letting them take out as much equity, even if you are. They're putting really a safety net in there. The other big thing is just, fixed rates versus those adjustable.
Yeah.
And then the stated income loans where you just said, I'm making $200,000 a year, whether you were making $75,000 or $50,000. And so people were, ultimately getting a mortgage they really honestly couldn't afford right out of the gate.
But with the ARMs, it felt like they could.
Well,
and so they get into the house, they get their family all settled and think, oh, life is great. I can do this at $1,100 a month. And then all of a sudden things change or you've got a balloon.
Well, when you look at, too, the Phoenix market in general, I believe for years I've always felt this way, that we've been undervalued throughout the country. When you look at the opportunities out here for whether it's working for a company or self-employment, when you look at the newness of houses in general, property tax in general compared to most parts of the country or a lot. Having a neighbor like California has always made us look more affordable no matter what.
Employment opportunities,
Yeah, outside of amusement parks and beaches, what don't we have that...
Well, how many times a year do you visit those places?
Exactly.
You can still go do that. But I think the big shift we're seeing, especially out here in the East Valley with, Gateway Airport and, this tech corridor that's being built along Ellsworth and Elliott, with you bring in some of your big names, your Apples and Googles and guys that are, companies that are looking out here, that we're bringing jobs to and we're bringing people. So Phoenix market we've always outpaced most of the states as far as more people moving here than moving away. We have a lot of retirees. We have young families. We have second home people. So we have a lot of diversity out here, and our climate, that's the other big thing is, our big natural disasters are the rain we had, here and there, and that gives them something to talk about. So the stability in our market, I feel very good about. Again, there's things that happen. None of us have the crystal ball, but there's so many differences between then and now.
Equity is the big game changer, I think, in today's market. The two things, equity and then the fact that this was created by lack of supply for years of underbuilding from builders and things, not kind of a false demand that 2005 was, where they decided it was a right to own a home and lowered the lending guidelines and created a bunch of buyers. This is more lack of supply. along with that. And, again, going back to the leading experts, the top 8 that they polled, the average appreciation through 2025 was 4.8%. So nobody is foreseeing this going backwards or this changing that quickly. That way it's going to continue and level, but that's kind of where most are seeing that as well.
Yeah, I think the other big driver to this, when you look back, I was having a conversation the other day with a past client that's asking the question, should I be selling now or not? And it's always an interesting, I guess we use the word depends on the situation. But the big driver, and we've had several people now recently that, when they bought a house for $350,000, for example, at 6.5% interest rates, which is what we saw, back then, or even a little higher in some cases. And now you're buying a house at, sub 3% or 3%. Ironically, a $500,000 house is essentially the same payment.
2020 was the most affordable to buy a home in Arizona it had been since 2016.
And that's the crazy. And
right.
You couldn't even go rent. I mean, you look at what apartments are renting for now, single family homes. And now, for those who've seen some of these communities popping up, that they're literally building like little single family homes all for rent. And so I think, houses are still not too expensive to buy. But if you're in the local market, it feels like, oh my gosh, prices have gone up. But the actual affordability, the monthly payment,
what you're locking into, unlike renting, when it may even feel a little bit high for 2021, but skip ahead a couple years and the rents have gone up substantially. We've seen the dollar is worth less at that point. And when you stabilize your monthly payment with a mortgage, it actually, the cost of living goes down each year.
Well, and Kraig had touched on it earlier, the foreclosure days. I mean, for example, March of 2008, we had, 235,000 foreclosure filings. In April of 2021, and this is nationally, we had 11,800. So you're going to have people that situations come up, but I mean, it's just almost not even measurable when you break that across the United States, which means people are in a much stronger equity position than they were. They're not tapped out on it. And so we've had enough run of a gain that people are actually in a pretty good spot. Really, a lot of what we're seeing is people are taking some out to, make improvements to their property, which are only increasing the value. So,
or buy a rental property.
I mean, buy a second property and let someone else pay it off. It almost seems illegal, but turns out it's not. So,
well, and with the foreclosure thing, a lot of questions I get are about the forbearance and the numbers and that. And as of right now, there's 1.8 million homes in forbearance or mortgages, but 87% of those have at least 10% equity. And of the remaining 13%, that equals 241,000. So even if every single one of those did foreclose, that's in the entire country, and it would be absorbed. Just as an example, in 2019, there was 277,000 foreclosures. So this big fear of this foreclosure thing coming, the numbers aren't there.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing right now too is, I know there's a lot of noise out there in the market. There's a lot of people that have opinions, and there's a lot of stuff on the internet. And we all agree, right? Most of it.
And a lot of experts.
It's all true, right? If it's on the internet, it's got to be true. So, one thing I always want to recommend, we're always going to have the client and our potential client's best interest at heart, and always give them the truth, whether they want to hear it or not. And, one common theme that I think you'll hear from us going forward is, just call us first. If you have questions or you heard something, stay in curiosity, send us an email, call us, and just ask, and we'll get you the answer. Because, every market is a little bit different, even in the Valley. Different things drive different times in the market, whether it's new construction, resale, thinking about renting, what do rents look like?
Home maintenance, repairs, updates.
Well, that's the other thing. It's interesting you say that. We do get the calls on, not as many as I probably wish we would, to really help guide people, is on what should we do to our house to get the best return on investment. And there are a lot of factors to that, but we can help guide you to where some of these homes need some updating, but where should the money be spent?
Just to pile in or add on to that, I think as an example of that, it's one thing that we've always done is like if I come out to your house for a listing appointment, it's not just talk about how quickly we can get the house on the market and get it sold. We're going to talk about your goals and what your long term is. As an example, I'm at 4 times this year I've gone to somebody's house to talk to them about selling their house, and it ended up, after talking and having conversations, they decided to keep it in rent because we talked about the opportunities there and what that would look like for them and building wealth in that. Again, I walk out of there without a listing, but at the same time, we did the right thing. We helped advise a client to help them, grow their wealth through real estate and be their guide through that. And I'll tell you, that feels awesome because it's going to be fun to look back when they go 5 years from now or whatnot and see where they're at.
Well, that's really the reason we're launching and doing this podcast, is so that we can really get the word out to people on what is happening, not just in the market, but with your house and, the best things to do and maintenance and all the good stuff. Because truthfully, one of the things I think we get the most excitement and feel good out of is just helping guide people with all their different options, all the different tools that are out there. Interestingly, for the last 100 years, real estate's kind of been done the same way. Now with technology and some of the tools out there, we've got so many different ways to buy and sell real estate. I'm sure you've heard of some of the companies. You've got your Zillows, Open Doors, OfferPads. even 72 Sold, it's a marketing program. There's so many tools out there that instead of having to call all them individually, you just call us first and we can help guide you through all your different options, which each one does, what makes sense. And that way you don't have to give out your identity, those kind of things either, because you're just talking to your trusted advisor. And we take pride in that and a huge responsibility to that.
Absolutely.
All right, everybody. Well, we just wanted to, as Scott mentioned earlier, maybe burst the bubble, the fear of that and that concept. So if there's anything that we mentioned today that you want to dive deeper on, or any questions that you have, reach out to us, let us know. I'm sure you're not alone. Other people might. It'd be a great topic we can talk about. I know we've talked in general today, but if you want to talk more about your specific situation, you got a friend, family member, anyone who's looking to buy, sell, or just has a real estate question, we want to be your go-to. So we appreciate your time and commitment to getting educated